Welcome back to the last episode of 2025. Thank you, everybody, for all the support this year and the previous years on the podcast. If you're thinking about starting your alcohol-free journey in 2026, I want to encourage you to join the Sober Motivation community. The first 30 days are free. This is for you to find out if the community is going to be a good fit for your situation. It's not about pass or fail. It's about getting connected with some other people that are on the journey so that you can talk openly about what you're going through, make some connections, and achieve your goals. Check out the Sober Motivation community today. I'll drop the link in the show notes of this episode. If you have any questions about the community, joining, about the meetings, we have 15 meetings every single week. Just an incredible community. We're planning our next meetup for 2026, and it's just a really great place. I mean, a lot of people have been sober since their first meeting, and people that haven't keep coming back because there's something special there. It's not about, hey, this didn't work out for you, you're such a bad boy, or anything like that. It's just supporting people and meeting people exactly where they're at. And we would love to have you come and hang out for some meetings. I host 3 meetings a week over there, and we have some other incredible hosts. I notice community connection makes all the difference for people on this journey. Trying to do it alone is such an uphill battle. It really is. It's possible. Of course, there are people that do it, but I just find that it takes people so much longer when you get stuck in your own head with everything you're going through. So come and check us out. And again, thank you so much for hanging out with me, with the podcast in 2025. Today, Brian joins me all the way from Germany to share his sobriety story. We talk about growing up around chaos and alcohol, finding an outlet in hockey, and how drinking went from fun to life or death turning point. Brian hasn't had a drink since December 28th, 1991, 34 years ago. And this conversation is a powerful reminder that change is possible no matter where you start from. And let's get into Brian's story.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you done this before?
No, first time. So
welcome back to the Sober Motivation podcast. Today we've got Brian with us. Brian, how are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah.
Good, man. Where are you joining today?
Well, I live in Stuttgart, Germany. So awesome. I grew up in America, but I've lived here for 10 years now. Yeah. My wife's from here. So
awesome, man. What was it like for you growing up?
Well, okay. I was born August 28th, 1970 in Spokane, Washington. My mom was 17 when I was born. And so, not optimal, but back then that wasn't also not so out of the norm. I never met my real father. I didn't know that until like the details behind it until I was, 13, 14 or so. But growing up without a father, it's obviously has, I think that's the first pain I felt growing up. My real father, like my first father, my mother, before I was born, she had met someone, they were married. And so when I was born, that was my first dad, obviously my stepdad. He found a way he was drafted into the Vietnam War, but found a way to get out of it. He was more or less an alcoholic. I remember some very early memories sitting in I think must have been 2 or 3, sitting in my chair in the back seat of our 65 Plymouth. And I remember seeing big bottles, like empty wine jugs, and drinking. I remember seeing, alcohol all around me. Also back then, when my uncle came back from Vietnam, he was also friends with my mother's husband, Bob. They were dealing heroin at this time. And I mean, I was 4 or 5, but I remember seeing from my very short viewpoint, looking up at the table and seeing men with beards and 38 specials on the table and bags of stuff, and realizing, this is probably not normal. So then when I was around 4 or 5, my mother basically she wanted a divorce from my father at that time. I mean, he was drinking and on drugs, and I mean, he loved us. I remember he was like a beautiful man to us, but obviously he had his problems, issues. And he ended up, so they divorced. We moved into a new house. It didn't, I'm not sure, again, I was 4 or 5 years old, but I remember that my father would come and break into our house and grab me and my brother. My brother was born in 72, so he's 2.5 years younger than me. And so really at a young age, also terror. And I wasn't sure what's going on, but there was a lot of fighting and we were basically being taken out of our house, and there was chases and sirens, and I was scared to death. I didn't even know what was going on. This happened a few times, off and on, and then eventually to the point when, and I don't know, I guess I can go into some details here because this is what, a lot of my pain came from as a child, and why later on drinking made so much sense, or at least made me feel okay. So Bob, my father at the time, he was waiting inside my mom's house. She was out on a date. She came home and she was with her date at the time. And basically my dad beat the guy almost to death, put him in a bathtub, took my mom on, this was Mother's Day, it's 1975, and kidnapped my mother. Took her to a place what I called Farmer Lee. I used to go to this place west of Spokane with my father at the time. He was a big bird watcher, and we hunted. And so I just remember, I was at in these times of trouble in between, I was always at my grandparents' house, my brother and I. And I remember, later on hearing about this, but I remember I was at the night he kept her outside of this farm, and basically threatened to kill her and threatened to kill my grandparents. And overnight, and the next morning he let my mom go, and then ended up shooting himself. And so, I was 5. And then, I remember my grandfather was kind of my main go-to father figure. And and I remember at this time, like, thinking, oh God, I hope my grandpa doesn't die, because, my father had just died. And then later on, 2 years later, my mother was, she was married again, and when I was 7. And like I said, I grew up playing hockey, and luckily, I think that's basically in the long run where I could let out my frustration. My last stepfather, he was also abusive, physically, verbally. In my teens, it got worse. But again, I had hockey, thank God. I mean, I always tell people, like, hockey saved my life. At 13, when you're able to use your body, I used to just crush people. I was a really good defenseman. I wanted to play pro hockey. I put my life and soul into it. And it was, thank goodness, a very great, safe place to let out all my frustration. Later on, I heard about where my father was, my biological father, that because my mom was so young, she was 16 when she was pregnant with me. And, my grandparents were pretty Catholic at the time, and said, basically they told my biological father, you will marry my daughter. My grandfather said this. And then I've heard they were basically technically married on the steps of my grandparents' house, while my biological father or biological grandfather waited for him. They said their things, and then he left. And basically my grandfather says, you will stay out of Brian's life. We will raise him. So this is it. So I just knew I had a dad, but I didn't know where he was. He lived somewhere in Spokane. And so then it went through these series of stepdads, and luckily my grandpa was there. But the lack of a real father was extremely painful.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of that. As you're going through it, because some of the stuff is relatable, what you're sharing there. I'm kind of, it's going back in time in my life. My mom had twins at 16. Her parents as well, very Catholic. My grandparents, and did a good job raising us like that. Well, like looking after us for her to finish school. She went to school to be a nurse, and my dad really wasn't present. When I reflect back on that time personally, I didn't really pick up on that it was such an important part of the wheel, or that it would be sort of at
Yeah,
the time I was going through it. I mean, looking back now, for me anyway, it's easier to understand. When I did pick up on it, though, is when when I got a little bit older and went to friends' houses and could see
sure.
sort of the family dynamic, that I started to think to myself, maybe something is a little bit different about, the way I'm kind of growing up,
Yeah.
and maybe the opportunities too. Was there a specific time, or did you sort of feel something different from the beginning?
Yeah, good question. I think the same way as what you just shared. Yeah, it was quite obvious when at elementary school. I wasn't picked up by my father. I was picked up by my stepfather, but because yeah, I mean, of course, it just wasn't. Yeah, I held everything against him. He was not nice to us, and I think he. I don't know. It's like I always wondered where my real father was. Like why did this happen? Like later on, I heard, my mom, I believe, explained this to me, kind of how this all happened when I was a kid. It still didn't help. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. What about with your mom? I mean, was she struggling? I mean, you mentioned your one stepdad there. There was the drugs and selling
Hmm.
heroin, and a lot of drinking. Was your
Yeah.
mom into drinking at all too, or no?
I mean, unfortunately, she worked her ass off with going to school. She got an education first in art and graphic design, and then in counseling. She was working also full time. She used to manage a restaurant. She worked at bars when I was younger. Yeah, I think that's where she met my last stepdad. He was a fireman. And yeah, where I grew up in Spokane, I mean, that's just where a lot of cops and firemen were at bars, and my mom met him there. And I remember spending, years of my childhood at bars,
Yeah.
when she was cleaning up or opening, playing pool and foosball and pinball. And so alcohol was always around us. My mom was, because she was really young growing up, she had parties. We had big old house parties at our house, and beer
Yeah.
was all around. Being at my grandma and grandpa's house, often my grandma always had a beer. She smoked. She had a tall glass of real cheap beer. From what I
Yeah.
heard later on, like old Milwaukee or Schaefer or Schmidt stuff, in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
And then she would offer me, I don't know if I asked, but I would drink. I would taste a beer. I think, it was just always around us. I had an aunt and uncle I grew up with also that helped raise us. When I was like 9, 10 years old, sometimes they would make drinks, and then usually it should be a mocktail for the kids, but I would get a real one every once in a while. So it was always sort of, yeah, cool. I was surrounded by, younger adults, I guess too young to be the best parents, at least as far as when somebody should be drinking beer or not, or alcohol. Yeah.
Yeah. Which, I mean, it's interesting you kind of bring that up too. Like, I would say that
I mean,
that's probably a lot more normal than we think, right? Like, I remember my grandfather, giving me I was like, "Hey, what are you drinking?" I mean, I hated it. It was like Labatt
yeah,
Blue or something. And I was
yeah,
like, how are you drinking that? But I
yeah,
mean, I think it's like an oddly common thing that, maybe in today's world, we see it a bit differently, but then, hey, I
like,
can really see that as kind of being a thing. So you're really plugging into hockey, and you shared a little bit with me the notes too, how much of an important role hockey played in your life as sort of an outlet of maybe everything you were going through at home.
yeah,
I see this a lot of times. I feel when the home life is chaotic,
hmm,
as kids really latch onto something. A lot of times I feel like it's either sports or it's like schooling, right? Like doing really good
yeah,
in school,
yeah.
to sort of maybe
Big,
get validation or to fit in. But for you, you're really plugged into hockey. I mean, your love for the game, and you mentioned you
yeah,
started skating at 5, and that was an
yeah.
escape for you.
I mean, luckily I had that. That was, I could let it all out. I mean, even before you could body check, I mean, just to go ice skating and this physical sport. I think kids, if you growing up with any frustrations, find some sort of outlet as soon as possible. the balance out, tough times in life. So
Yeah.
I was lucky I had that. And I think thinking back, a lot of my friends, I'd say 50, 60% of the kids I grew up with also had similar upbringings. A father that maybe wasn't there or wasn't in the best shape. And it's a pretty expensive sport to play. But luckily my grandpa helped out with us. But yeah, it was a lifesaver for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So as you kind of go through this, age like 13 and stuff, I mean, what are your memories kind of going through there, and how were you doing like in school and making
Yeah.
friends and all of those
I
things?
hated, yeah. Elementary school, I loved. I remember I felt, it's funny when I think back on elementary school. I remember in the sixth grade, I was third toughest. This is funny to think about, like who's ranking and who's fighting. But we had a portable, like we had the main room, and then we had portables, and we had some, mentally disabled kids also there that went to school with us. That I remember when I was a little kid, they were picked on. Yeah, they were mobbed, or and I would stand up for them, stick up for them. So I remember at recess there was quite often skirmishes or fights, and by the time I reached sixth grade, there was only two people that were tougher than me. Yeah, but it's just funny to think about this, that we were fighting that often to have a ranking. But needless to say, I felt like first through sixth grade, I was a part of a family. And then when you go, like at least where I grew up with, then there's middle school, seventh and eighth grade. And then it's brand new. You're with new kids. In PE, we had to, if you were skins, you'd have to take your shirt off. And, I was a little chubby kid, so no kid at 13 wants to take their shirt off in the gym with other girls and whatnot. So it was a very, very hard time. And I think at the time, my stepdad, I remember I hated my stepdad at this time. And I was acting out, of course, at school. It's obviously a direct correlation. I was in home ec, and we had sewing machines, and I was like, the sewing machine's running, and I'd hold scissors to it. And I mean, I was just a very destructive kid. It's sort of spilling out of, I had so much anger and pain. It was starting to spill outside of hockey too. And then I'm trying to find my group. Who do I belong to in middle school? And I really liked, hard rock, heavy metal at the time. And I could also play some sports, but I kind of veered towards the stoners, And so I started smoking weed at 13, like trying it and smoking. I realized it wasn't my drug of choice, but then I started, like, we would, on the weekends, we would connect and, hey, let's meet later on and bring what you can. And we'd start drinking. That's basically when I started drinking a little bit of alcohol myself.
Was that 13?
So, yeah. But of course, middle school, off and on, like maybe every few weeks, maybe on a weekend, we drink. Maybe I remember, I think in the eighth grade, one summer, somebody had a whole bunch of Old English 800, like malt liquor, hot, really, like it was in the middle of the summer. We opened up the trunk and we're drinking this. It was like boiling hot malt liquor. I almost vomited all over, but we had a lot of it. So we did it, and we were chewing tobacco and really got all sick. And, wow, that was fun. Of course not. It was, horrible, but any chance we had, I think that helped us, forget about what's going on at home or school, because I wasn't in school.
When you reflect back on those earlier days of drinking, what was the experience like? I mean, because some people share different ones of like, okay, I'm finally home. This makes so much sense. Other people, it's maybe a different experience.
I do remember, like you were saying, when my grandma shared a beer with me, or I could drink a beer, I was kind of, okay, weird. Like when you first drink coffee, it's also, it's a little bit, you have to get used to it. But the first time I had enough alcohol to make me feel something, it felt like, wow, like where has this been? It's really, and I think, I don't know, I believe if you're a real alcoholic, you don't know, but it connects with you in a different way than someone who's non-alcoholic. I mean, it has to be. I don't know, because it was just like that. It grasped me fully. And it started, basically any opportunity I could drink, then I took it.
Yeah.
Later on, out of middle school, I survived, and into high school in ninth, 10th, through 12th grade, I was starting to drink with my friends more often, probably at least once every weekend. When I was 16, I started playing hockey. I was playing junior hockey with 21-year-olds. So there you go. So I had a direct, line to someone who could buy alcohol for me. So then I was drinking a 12 pack, on Friday night, Saturday night, sometimes Sunday night. I was getting into like my 12th grade. I was also starting to drink every once in a while at school, like earlier, like in the afternoons or whatnot. Because the more I had, it felt like the more I wanted. And it was also, I was a shy kid. You start drinking, you realize, everything moves. I can say what I want. I can approach girls, I can, liquid courage, but it sure did it,
Yeah. So it's checking. It's sometimes what I say, like kind of checking some boxes for you. I'm really interested too on that connection you make of sort of like those first times and those memories of drinking, because everybody sort of has a different experience in one way or another. I mean, some people might drink at 16 and then say, okay, that was too much, right? I don't feel good, or I know that wasn't. And then there's some of us when we have that first, because I relate to that a lot. The first time that I really got into it, I had those same thoughts, like, oh my gosh, right? Like I remember that day, and there's a lot of things I don't remember from life growing up, but I remember that day like it was yesterday of the first time that I really, really got drunk from drinking and checked all the boxes. I felt like all my insecurities kind of slid away. I felt like all of the thoughts that I had maybe up until that point of not doing well in school and really struggling with relationships and kind of being a disappointment to my parents in that sense. I felt like all of that was gone, and I could maybe be present in the moment.
You find your clan, you find the people that you share this with, and make your own kind of small family in a way, the kids that want to have fun with you and do what you want, join in on this.
Yeah. And I think too, it really checked I think when I reflect back, I think that it really, like, to touch on what you said there, it gave me a sense of belonging. Like I finally, even though it was, destructive and everything else, I was like, okay, but at least I belong somewhere. That always seemed to outweigh the consequences or whatever else came with it.
Yeah.
So where do you go after high school?
Well, I wanted to play pro hockey. I ended up going to Sioux City, Iowa, to play in the United States Hockey League for Sioux City Musketeers. But I was in a terrible shape. I mean, I was probably 20 pounds heavier than I should have been. So needless to say, I wasn't playing as good. I was then more apt to be drinking. I mean, I was upset with myself. I wasn't playing where I wanted to play in another team in British Columbia. It was a far better league, but I didn't make the cut. So I went to Iowa. Played there. It lasted like 2 months. I ended up quitting because I was homesick. I wasn't playing my best. I was sick of myself. Literally my whole life, I worked my ass off to make it as far as I could. And then realizing my drinking is what, I did it to myself. It's like, how stupid, because, drinking in high school, like the whole summer after my senior year, I got so ripped every day almost. But it was, like I said, my family, my group, my clan, I had so much fun. And that, and I had other friends that weren't alcoholics that would spend this time at home in the garage shooting pucks. I had a couple friends that made it to the NHL. And they weren't partying, and I was partying. I wasn't almost as good as them, but I chose to party. They chose to continue working. I was, yeah, I was stuck.
What,
I, yeah,
yeah. Thanks for sharing that too. What, what was the response from people around you? Cause like you mentioned too, I mean, playing hockey, very expensive. And it seems like a lot of commitment. I hear a lot of people who come up through the ranks of always appreciating and thanking sort of their support circle, right? Their parents or
yeah,
grandparents or whoever it was because of the early practices, late nights, and everything else that
right,
goes
right.
involved. And I've heard a few people that have went down this journey and in not only letting themselves down, but for them it was like they felt like they let everybody down. Was that anything that crossed
For
your
sure.
mind?
Yeah, totally. Like my grandpa, like I said, he put a lot of time into, he's more or less my father, through all of this mess I went through, was always there and helped us with, money and time. And, yeah, of course, obviously not just myself, but my grandfather and my mom as well, and also then I remember when I was in Iowa, my mom, I would call home, talk to my mom, and my mom was like crying. She missed me so much. I missed her too. And then I remember, damn, I just wish my mom would have been a little stronger for me. It could have maybe helped me. It's not her fault, of course, but
Mhm.
that's how, growing up, with such a young mom and someone that's almost, yeah, codependent, so close with me. Of course, I felt bad for all of those reasons. I let myself down, I let my grandpa down, I let my mom down. Um, yeah. And
Yeah. What
yeah.
did you have any conversations that like you remember that stand out to you, like with your grandfather too, about
Well,
how
I
you were
think
feeling?
yeah, I mean, that kind of stuff. I mean, I shared that stuff with the flip side. My mom was, like I said, she was a counselor. She used to work at like a boys and girls home, like high school, or like basically teenagers. And she was always open with us, and I could always share my thoughts and feelings with my mom. So,
Mm.
luckily, she was also an alcoholic. She quit when I was 16. It was sort of like she handed me the torch in a way, and then I basically started, when I was in my teens to drink. But yeah, luckily my mom, I mean, it was later that when I moved back from Iowa and I was 17, 18, I was really lost because I was like, damn, I screwed my whole, my plan up to go play hockey. So I came back to Spokane, played my old team, drank. I worked full time. I played hockey, practicing 3 times a week, going out of town every weekend, playing at home every other weekend. And when I wasn't working and playing hockey, I was drinking. And at this time, with I was 18, 19, I was drinking almost a case of beer at a time. I was just drinking as much as possible because, yeah, that just really, it was not something I could just let go that I didn't do so well in Iowa. It crushed me daily. And so, of course, drinking
Yeah.
made me feel better. Um, but I had to drink more and more, and then I started gaining weight, then I was starting to turn into a pig, like I didn't look good. So I didn't feel good. And so I would drink. And so it was just a horrendous cycle, and then also your friends, or the people at least you hang out with who you think are your friends. I remember one of the main, like I remember when later on, I would I was a super nice. I graduated when I was senior in high school. I was voted friendliest, and I'm a nice guy. I'm a friendly, super, and authentic nice guy. Drinking, I was also usually nice, but if there were friends of mine that had issues with somebody else, then I was there to help clean up. So it was sort of people knew that I was able to, defend myself or stick up for my friends and get into fights or whatever if need be. But it happened that, yeah, a few times I'd be arrested and spend some time in jail for a weekend. Um, or,
Yeah.
like New Year's Eve, I'd go out and drink, just way too much and pop off to somebody and then ended up getting in a fight. And those times are happening more and more and more. And I remember talking to my mom, saying, I want to quit drinking. it's been almost 34 years now, but back then it seemed impossible to quit drinking because that was my whole life. All my friends, we all partied and we all drank. And that was my little family that I found. And we had fun. Not all the time. When I was in jail, that wasn't too much fun. But all that builds up. Whenever you messed up, then you just drink more. And I was fat, and I would drink and 2 a.m. stop at the convenience store and feed my face, and then start over the next day and drink, and it was never ending. And I remember talking to my mom in my living room. I was just like crying. I was just at my wit's end. All I wanted to do was quit drinking alcohol, because I knew if I could quit, then I could start figuring out my life. But I didn't know how to quit, because that was all my life. It was everything I knew. Yeah. I mean, I ended up hitting my rock bottom. I was hitting bottoms, but my rock bottom was also after 15 hours of drinking and getting in a fight and almost killing somebody, even though it was self-defense. I went way beyond this. I knew I'd really hurt somebody, and it took a few weeks, and then the cops came to my house. Arrested me, took me downtown, and then I ended up I was in prison for 3 months. Luckily, I mean, it could have been for 2 years for second degree assault, and it wasn't all that it really hurt me beyond anything, that I almost killed somebody, that I had done, like that. My drinking had led me, who used to be the friendliest in high school, to almost, hurting, like almost killing somebody. That is what finally did it for me. I was scared to death. I knew the police were going to come and get me. I was afraid of everything. I remember I knew I had to quit drinking. I went to court, and I remember telling the judge that, I don't care what happens to me. I need to find a way to quit drinking. Like, please send me to treatment. Help me, as I want to quit drinking. Because I knew I couldn't do it myself. It helped me to realize that I can't keep doing this. And the judge saying, when you go, you do your time, whatever, I had to do a 2-year treatment. But I mean, I realized it finally, that I can't mess around with this anymore. It's not just me, in spending a weekend in jail or whatever, but I almost hurt somebody. Like, really, I hurt somebody bad enough that I said, I can't mess around with this anymore.
With the drinking. Well, and you mentioned there too, and I think in a few of the notes you sent me, like drinking, 24 beers. And then you mentioned there on that time, it was like a 15-hour thing. I mean, up until this point, did you ever try to stop?
The last few years I was drinking. So in 1920, I would say, okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going to told my friends, okay, I can't drink this week, or I got to take a few weeks off. Because at that level of my drinking, so maybe 4 or 5 years, the last few years I was drinking the same amount, but I was getting even more drunk. And then I was starting to black out. And so that, obviously, that's, a new level. like basically getting drunk enough that you can't remember what you're doing and waking up wherever you've woken up. I surely tried myself. Like, I'm going to try and do it. Okay. But when I finally realized I needed to quit, I went into treatment, and then I ended up moving to Seattle. I moved out of Spokane. I decided luckily when I was younger, I drew and I knew what graphic design was. And I knew sort of at a younger age, if hockey didn't work out, plan B would be to learn graphic design. So I went to art school in Seattle. And that's basically when I think I was 20 when I first stopped drinking, going to treatment. And I left Spokane. It was a complete new city. But I would not have, if I would have stayed in Spokane and even gone through my treatment, I wouldn't have quit. I just couldn't. You can't go back into your old surroundings and think you're going to quit or be able to. It just wouldn't have been possible. So I think, if I were to recommend to anybody, if they're quitting, you have to get out of your old everyone I know who's ever tried to quit drinking, and they're not out of their old, their scene, their old connections, these old things that keep them doing what they're doing, it's going to be extremely hard. And so
Yeah.
I
So like changing up your surroundings and even
I think you have to.
even like changing up the people that, yeah, of course. I mean, it's so interesting too, right? Because we're so, we become so afraid of like losing what we have. But then when you're away from it, you're just like, I was
Yeah,
anyway. I just was like, man, I didn't really have a whole heck of a lot. We partied and there
yeah,
was
yeah,
fun times and there was
yeah.
disastrous times. But at the end of the
Okay.
day, like it wasn't, I was maybe making it into something that it really wasn't, as we
Hmm.
continued
Hmm.
to grow up. It's interesting. I'm picking up on sort of that identity piece, which I think a lot of people relate
Yeah,
to, right? Maybe growing up, your identity was really attached to the hockey guy. And then you were
big
this other,
drinking guy. Yeah,
yeah. And then the hockey kind of in one way or another doesn't completely go away. It sounds like that's always kind of been part of your life in one way or another, but sort of your dream and everything you've worked towards, that is, you're not headed in that direction. So then it's like, okay, drinking kind of becomes the thing, and you're the drinking
yeah.
guy, drinks a lot, parties, has a good time. And
I was good at it. I always, and sad to say, I was always drinking and driving. I was the driver. Because I could drive good for being drunk. And that's another thing. I'm so lucky, beyond lucky, that I didn't ever hurt anybody, kill anybody driving, or my friends. But even back in high school, there were two times where I've had friends that were killed in drinking and driving, accidents, one in a boat, one in a car. People that were really close to me. I was a pallbearer to both of these people that died. Um, but yeah, I remember I was, in my senior year, I used to party with the juniors because they partied harder. So that was yeah, right. This, if you knew me, I was a hockey player. Some people knew I was an artist, but I partied. I had fun. I could drink a lot. I could drink and drive. Beyond brutal that I, even say this or think that I was behind the wheel. At
yeah,
least over here in Germany, there's such good public transportation, trains and buses and whatnot. And I think there's a whole lot less of that going on, at least over here. But
yeah,
where I came
yeah,
from, that was normal.
yeah, yeah. That is, yeah. I mean, so relatable to me too. Yeah. I mean, there's just so many, I look back now at all the poor choices, and it was just, sometimes I talk about, you could probably put a piece of paper between how things could have been a whole heck of a lot
Yeah,
worse. I think that denial plays a really important, I don't know if it's important or what it is, but it plays a role in us keeping this going. As you mentioned all of
yeah,
this now, hindsight's 2020, right? And I'm
yeah.
relating to so much of it. And I'm just like, man, the way I was living was just complete chaos in so many different ways. But when you're in it, when you're right there in it, you
Do you, that's
don't see
normal?
it. Yeah, it's
Not at all.
just,
No,
yeah.
no.
And it kind of goes back, I think, to what you mentioned before too, the people we surround ourselves with. Because in my life today, if for whatever reason I started living like that again,
Mhm.
people would be mentioning stuff. Hey, like, what are you
Sure.
doing? Like, wake up. But I surrounded myself in the earlier, when I was drinking a lot and
Yeah,
partying, I surrounded myself with people who, I mean,
like-minded people.
maybe they didn't really say a whole heck of a lot. And I think that was by design, because I obviously didn't want people to,
You needed each other. Yeah.
yeah, I didn't want anybody to sort of question the chaos, maybe any more than I did when I, kind of sobered up. So you mentioned you have this incident too, where you get into this fight and then they, give you this thing for treatment, for rehab.
Yeah.
I mean, what was
Yeah.
that? Did you live somewhere, or how did that look?
It wasn't inpatient. I remember the first month it was Monday through Friday, the whole month for 4 hours a night. So at least it was pretty intense. And I mean, yeah, that was the first time that I thought, okay, what's going on in my life? Why am I so upset, angry, hurt? Why am I medicating myself? Why do I need to stuff alcohol in my body? And then yeah, part of that is just thinking, writing stuff down. What happened, from day one when I grew up? What did I go through? Realizing, oh, God, that's not normal to have, a father that kills himself, or a stepfather that's abusive, or, that's not optimal. That's not the way it should be. And so of course you're hurt. You're just a kid. And, that kids, like boys, they're not supposed to cry. You tough it out. And so so you're sad. That means you're angry and mad and mean. And for me, luckily, like I said, hockey was, I could let that out so that I could balance. I could be the nice kid I wanted to be.
Yeah, that's okay. So that was kind of what you kind of did for rehab. Where are you living at throughout all of this when you go back to Washington, like after Iowa? Are you living with
Yeah,
your mom?
that was Spokane. Yeah, in Spokane, exactly. And
Yeah. How is your
I
relationship with her like throughout all of this stuff too? Like you mentioned before, you guys were close and you
Yeah,
chatted
we're
and
super close. I mean, she passed away 2 years ago. But I, yeah, I mean, she knew. Even my brother, he drank too and had fun. He didn't get in the trouble. But luckily, my mom was very open. And I mean, I could share whatever with my mom. But also, we did our own thing. We lived with my mom. But I worked. I did my things. I worked. I partied. I played little hockey, but I was never, like 1920, I wasn't in good enough shape to really play my best. So drinking was a priority, my work and drinking, hanging out with my friends, partying,
yeah.
until it just
So
wouldn't work anymore. So,
yeah. Yeah. So when do you get sober? And was it during this, like, was it right after the incident? Like when you were in this 4 month or this,
yeah,
this rehab thing? Like that was the last time you drank? Was that night or
yeah.
no?
I was in treatment for a total of 8 months. So I stayed sober for 8 months. After the first month, it was like once a week, and for like, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours a night. I was working at a full time job. I was going to community college. Yeah, I had a girlfriend at the time that ended up, she in Spokane. Then she moved to Wisconsin, and later on, she got in a car wreck, and so I just quit everything and drove to Wisconsin because that was sort of my first girlfriend, my first love, but maybe in hindsight also a new sort of addiction for love. So I mean, just if you break up with somebody, or somebody you're with doesn't want to be with you, and then they call you, she got in a car wreck, she called me up and said, can you come over? Sure, no problem. I dropped everything, drove to Wisconsin, ended up living with her, and her alcoholic dad, of course. I was working full time there, and then as she got better, she had like broke her leg and arm in a car wreck, and later on, I think I was there for maybe 2 months. She was better and out and about on crutches, and instead of, she's like my girlfriend, but she's starting to see other people in town, go behind my back and whatnot. So I hadn't drank for 8 months, and I was living with her and her alcoholic father. And I remember in the kitchen, there was a fifth of McNaughton's whiskey. And I said, fuck it. And I drank the whole bottle just straight. I poured it in a glass, I think, whatever, 8, 9 times, done. I was watching TV, and I remember I had the hugest smile on my face. Again, it was like, where have you been? It was just like, oh, wow, The next day, I packed up my stuff and drove back. I told my old girlfriend at the time, or then, that immediately, I'm out of here. I drove back to Spokane. And then I knew I had to get back into treatment. And it was basically at that time that I decided I was going to move to Seattle. So it was like September of 91. So I moved there. I knew I had to sign up for treatment to finish my treatment again in Seattle. But yeah, I went on some wild excursions with drinking. And I mean, I don't want to go, I don't know. It's like, we're here to try and help people not drink. I don't want to go like glory days of my old times and how I barely survived. But was interesting, and I remember I learned this in treatment. They say, even though if you don't drink, your alcoholism increases, basically the disease, it still evolves. And after 8 months, I drank the fifth of whiskey like nothing. I remember I barely had a hangover the next day. It was just crazy. It was just weird. I drove back to Spokane, moved to Seattle, and I went out and had some fun, but I was blacked out very early on. It got worse and worse. Like I was drinking and couldn't remember anything, driving still without remembering anything, just doing some horrendous stuff. Luckily, I don't know how I made it through it, but then finally on the 28th of December in 1991, that was the last time I drank.
Wow.
So I went back and went to treatment, and I finished my 2 years. I had to start over. And it was hard though. I started going to college in Seattle when I was 21. So, I quit drinking alcohol when you're allowed to drink, so it was sort of like opposite day. So I would go to, we would have parties at school, and then a lot of my classmates were just drinking for the first time, and it was so hard for me because I wanted to show them who I was, my old identity, like the hockey playing, big drinker, can have a lot of fun. And it was, that was like one of the first times it was like really hard because I had to, well, and that's the point. You have to, if you quit drinking, you have to recreate yourself as the non-drinking version of yourself. I had to learn how to do everything without drinking. I had to find friends that didn't prefer to drink alcohol. I had to find new connections. I needed to learn how to talk to, women without having alcohol, to go out and do anything without drinking. That was all brand new to me. But it was a clean slate. I was meeting people that weren't alcoholics. They maybe had a beer or whatnot, and that's it, maybe two, and that was by far. So it was a whole new life for me, new connections, new experiences. Like I said, had I not done that, I wouldn't be living today. If I would have stayed in Spokane, drinking with my old buddies, getting in fights, getting put in prison, beating people up, drinking and driving, I would not be here today. I have some friends since then who have died that I know that drank too much, or people that own bars in Spokane that I know. And there's no way I would have been able to do this if I wouldn't have moved and started fresh. It was interesting. Later on, through the 90s, I lived in Seattle. I met my wife, who's from Germany. That's why I live in Germany, in the late 90s. And we moved to Germany first in 2002. And we lived here until 2008. I had my first son in 2001. Then we had twins in 2003. And I remember in 2005, where I had a client that had his own bike company, and I designed his logo and all of the graphics on his bikes. And in Friedrichshafen, Germany, is the big Eurobike show. And I would go there. I went there once because it was sort of the kickoff for his brand. And I went there during the day, and then in a big beer tent, I would always drink. It's called the Apfelschorle. So it's like apple juice with mineral water. And that was my drink. Everyone had beers and whatnot. I drink my Apfelschorle. And I remember sitting there having a good time. And then all of a sudden there was a joint being passed around. And I just sort of automatically, I don't know, it was like on autopilot. And I took a puff, and then, okay. And when I quit drinking alcohol, I quit doing everything. Obviously, you can't, you're just going to substitute one for the other. So, but at that time, I had been sober for 15 years, and I don't even know why I did this. It was just sort of. But then the next day, I took the train home, and my brain is starting to go click, 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 thinking, "Oh man, that was fun." I had a good time, even though I had my apple juice with my friends drinking their beers. But I think that little bit of marijuana, it started like clicking, my brain is starting to like, maybe after 15 years, maybe I can, that was the first time I thought maybe I could drink again. As wild as that sounds, I thought maybe I can just drink one beer a week. Or I even talked to my wife, and she's like, what are you talking about? I said, or maybe when we go out and eat dinner, like once, maybe on Saturdays, I'll just have one glass of wine, And it took a few weeks. I was really trying hard to talk myself into it. My heart and soul knew, that's a joke, but something was trying to get me. And luckily I made it through that. But it just reminds me that if you're sober, you have to really be careful of where you put yourself, I think, right now, I have no problem going and being around people that are drinking or whatnot. If it's a party, I think if people are getting really sloshed and it's really late, I can get out there. You always have to have an exit plan. I mean, you have to really, if you're sober, you have to, it's priority one.
Yeah.
And I think the longer I stay sober, more and more, and I think also like you and your account on Instagram and mental health, it's starting to be talked about more and more and more. It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. You probably see a lot of things change from now and then 34 years ago. I mean, I'm sure in all areas of life, but as far as how much I feel like people are more open, it's more
Sure.
like people are shifting of like, hey, this doesn't discriminate who it can impact. It can impact anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really cool that people like yourself and like so many others are sharing sort of their story too. So we can, maybe normalize too that, hey, you can struggle with this, but there's also a beautiful life on the other side of it. I mean, 34 years is incredible. What do you, what do you take away like from that of 34 years of not drinking? And
What I did, I was always honest with people. I always told people I wasn't, even back then when I think about it, it was hard because, like I said, that was earlier my identity. I had to create my own, like a new version of myself. I was very open. I had a hard time. I would every once in a while back then go to some AA meetings. And they were personally hard for me because I saw a lot of more typical drunks, maybe old men and I didn't see myself reflected in them as much. So in that regard, it was hard. But at the flip side, it wasn't anonymous. I was straight up. I told everybody I don't drink alcohol, that I used to. And I realize I can't do it successfully. It's a good way to put it. And it's important. And I think the longer I stay sober, the more I see there's more and more people, even in Germany, kind of the heart of Hefeweizen and beer, and people really respect that. They think, okay, wow. It's if there's people that would rather try to get you to drink because they want to be your friend, then those are the people that as lovely as they are, because that's what everyone says. Let's go have a beer. That's also tricky. Let's go. It's always let's have a beer, and I always have to say. And I used to say, well, I'm gonna meet you, but I'm gonna have a Coke. Is that okay? But I'm beyond that. I don't give a shit now. I just say we can have a beer, and when I'm there, you have to be honest, open, no shame. You have to just be straight up. But you can do that when you're out of your old life. You can't, I don't know. Like I said, there's no way you can do this if you're in your same circles and same sort of people that can't respect that. You have to find people that root for you, new people.
Yeah.
So
find a new community. It's interesting too. I always think of my old circles. I mean, they always expected me to show up in a certain way. And even when I tried to early on, because you get sort of to this point where it's like, okay, I don't connect with my old friends anymore, but I haven't yet made my new friends. So I'm kind of in this spot of like, could be referred to as the lonely middle.
That's hard.
And trying to find people, but you have to go towards what's uncomfortable. And if you go back to what you know and what's easy and what's comfortable, you're always going to end up with that same result. So that was like a difficult sort of transition for me. But my old friends, even though I tried to make it work, they only knew me as the person who showed up. So like, I wouldn't say it was their fault, but weird. It was weird. It was weird for them too, of like, hey, he's not drinking anymore and he's not acting wild and staying out all night. Like they didn't know how to act either.
Sure.
So meeting new people and people that are maybe headed in the same direction, or I like the other way that you drew it up too, because I see some people that are newly sober are like, I only can hang out with sober people. And I'm like, I don't know if there's all truth to that. I think you need to hang out with healthy people, productive people, and people that kind of bring a good energy, and in people that are going to go for a morning coffee with you.
That have found their balance somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, and what you just said is so alcoholic. I mean, it's all also either black or white. I either drink 24 beers and 5 Long Island doubles, or nothing. You know,
Yeah.
and we know life is full of ups and downs, and but yeah, you just have to do what you have to do to protect your sobriety. I remember after I went to art school, I remember when I graduated, I just sobbed. I was just crying so hard because that was the first time back then that I had really like succeeded at something that I put my mind to. And it was because I was sober. I had control. I could do what I want. And I was still kind of a mess, but I finished school and I graduated, and that was like one like positive, healthy step, in my new life. And ever since then, I mean, you've ups and downs, but ever since then, I've had more or less the life of my dreams. I mean, I've had a great life. I wouldn't have had as much it would have been the opposite had I not quit drinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
beautiful, man.
Yeah,
That's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
yeah, sure. I mean, it's even, I mean, we could have gone into details more. I hope I didn't. I hope that, what I just said made a little sense and like bookended it. I've gone through so much stuff that I can even get lost in my my little whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of twists and turns, I think in everybody's life, and in an hour or so, it's like I refer to it sometimes as like one speck of sand on a beach. There's so much more to everybody. There's so many layers, but I think the overarching takeaway that I have, hearing this and sort of the quick live version, is that things weren't really going in the direction you wanted to. And it took some sort of outside, intervention or some sort of force maybe to have the clarity and awareness in your life with that incident there. And then, you've been working at it, and, staying sober is not always easy, but it's always worth it,
Yeah, that's the point. I mean, you've got to find what is your bottom and really take that seriously, because if you do and you turn it around, it's only good. It's only good. It's only love. It's only as much as it's up to you. Then you're in control. With alcohol's in there, you have no control. It's and who doesn't want control?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I even think too, some people that might be earlier in sort of their drinking, for your story there, things picked up quick. For some people, it's maybe progressive over time, but it's interesting too how you share kind of the AA meeting and you're younger. And like I had those experiences too, and it was really hard to relate and connect. But now when I look back, like what everybody was sharing, I was like, I'll never end up there. And then it was like, dang it, I did. Whether I could relate at the time, I just couldn't see the bigger picture, but the things were there. So, people like kind of earlier on, it's like, I think for the majority of people, if you don't, make a shift of some sort, like you're always leaving yourself open. I mean, this is the thing I think about alcohol that's sort of the trickiest, right? For even maybe the weekend drinker, the weekend warrior.
Yeah.
The longer you keep alcohol in your life, the more you open yourself up to things going sideways in really bad ways.
For sure.
Not that every night drinking is a problem, that every night we drank was a problem, but there's definitely becomes probably more and more sort of red flags.
And who you were affecting, your wife, your children. I mean, my wife is also from an alcoholic background. I mean, the roles that you take as children from alcoholics, that continues. It's crazy, but it's so worth it.
Yes, I'm with you all day. Well, thanks again, Brian, all the way from Germany.
Hey, thanks, Brad. Thank you very much. It was cool talking to you, man.
Yeah, thank you. Another great episode, and I feel an incredible way to end 2025 here on the podcast. Thank you, Brian, for jumping on and sharing your story with all of us. Incredible. If you found the podcast helpful over this year or previous years, to keep you on track in your sober journey. Be sure to jump over to Apple or Spotify, leave a 5-star review, and I'll see you in the new year.